so we'll go ahead and start this thing. First, morning, thanks for showing up. Everybody watching online, yeah, of course. I want to send a big thanks to Pixelogic for having us. We didn't really start using ZBrush until pretty recently, and the fact that we did that and now we're here is kind of wild. So they've treated us very well. It's pretty humbling to be up here with a lot of other talent that does a lot of, we think, prettier things, but we'll see. And I also want to send a special thanks to Joe and Paul for showing the R7 stuff and making us drool, sad, lots of emotions.
You're welcome.
Thanks, buddy. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll go ahead and I have some pretty pictures. No sounds on this one yet. See? Pretty. So here's the weapons team at Red Storm and Massive working on the division. I wanted to send a shout out to Mr. Johannes Larson. He's one of our artists over at Massive that couldn't be here today, but he's been working with us hand in hand from across the pond and doing a great job. So I wanted to make sure he got some recognition as well.
Wait, can Michael reenact the image since he's got the same? There
please,
we go.
Please do.
Do it live, Michael.
Now we can clap.
Yeah.
Go ahead and clap. That's why that image was picked. That's exactly why, so thanks for that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the studio. I thought I had this image put together a little while ago, and it's just some of the Clancy stuff that our studio has put together since its inception. It's a lot of history there. It's a lot of stuff that we've all been very excited and proud to work on. When I first got into gaming, I played a lot of Ghost Recon and Rainbow Six, and one of the things I really wanted to do was work on a Clancy game, and somehow managed to get this as my first job out of school. So I'm very, very fortunate. Couldn't be happier to work on this kind of stuff. And I picked these two images here because it's kind of cool to show how much has changed since 96, 98. On the left, we got a character from, I think it's Ghost Recon Island Thunder. On the right there is a character from our most recent Ghost Recon Future Soldier. And it's just nice to see that difference and see how far that's come. Like I said, we've been working on the Clancy titles since 96. The studio was founded by Clancy, actually. So we've got that kind of ingrained in our DNA from the beginning. We feel like we're experts in that area. Authenticity and realism are huge keystones for us. This is literally the only thing that we do as a team right now is we try to get as accurate as possible on the stuff we're given. We feel like that kind of thing is very, very important for the customer base. We have a lot of fans out there that really love accurate stuff, and if we can give that to them, that keeps us from getting yelled at online or made fun of. So, all right. Yep, and one of the last things to touch on was we feel like we're in a little bit of a unique situation within the studio and within the industry, actually, for video game artwork, is that we have an entire weapons team dedicated to just weapons. In the past, we know we've heard some people say their character artists usually do that kind of thing. Maybe the environment prop guys will get on some of it, but we have a team here that does nothing but weapons, and we've been doing it for a combined, 15 years or something like that total, so. Okay, so the last game that we worked on where we actually got pushed a little bit to the forefront was Future Soldier. A little early on in the project, someone came up to us and said, wouldn't it be cool if we take all these guns you guys make and break them apart? We went, yeah, that'd be great. We should probably do that. So a little later into the project, we started trying to figure out what we could do to break these things apart and realized that our workflow was a little slower than we'd liked and was not quite working out for us. We had to start doing internal parts. We had to start showing off a lot more things than we've ever shown before. And that started to cause a few issues. We ended up shipping with about 50 weapons and 18 different attachments, made for a massive amount of work, and it was a little difficult to reuse some of the assets from previous gen. So we needed a little bit of a new workflow. But that brings me to this right now. Currently, we've been picked up to work on the division. We're helping with a couple of different studios. We have Massive, UB Newcastle, which I guess is Reflections, and us. So we have teams all around the world working on this one game, and I figured I'd go ahead and show the E3 2014 gameplay footage in case you guys have not actually seen it. So
Snow is falling down just a little bit. The world's so quiet and still. Santa's out there flying around, and it's true that if you need a
Advised to avoid the shoreline.
Okay, I know where we are. I'm setting the waypoint to the base. Check your map.
Sir, I think we found the hijacked one. We had a ship, you hear me? It rolled through the subway tunnels. I don't know.
Looks like it's pretty close. Alright, follow me. It's this way. Looks clear. I'm getting a reading over here. This must have been the last train out. Looks like everybody panicked. Okay. Where's Bronson? Send him another invite. This must be where they were talking about. Watch your step. There you are.
Hey guys, I brought Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, scoping out the area up ahead.
Okay, we're about to unlock my base. It's up here on the right. Heads up.
Alright, so what do we got here? The lead's by the base and it's behind the truck. I'm marking them up for you now.
Okay, let's take these guys out first as quietly as possible.
Alright, I have Tesla and Pulse up.
Alright, Ryan, let's change up our skills.
Just check. Yeah, whatever.
I'll pull aggro from the left here. You guys good to go? All good.
Yep, ready.
Alright, here we go.
Up there!
He's down.
What the hell?
Get that last guy, get that last guy. Don't
I
let him
can't,
go.
he's getting away.
He's gone. Got incoming.
Alright, let's go.
Okay, coming from the right. Find cover, find cover. Ooh, watch out, watch out, watch out.
Holy crap.
There they are.
There's loads of them.
I can't get a shot. Try and hit him from the right.
Can't. I'm gonna switch my weapon.
Okay, I got you. I'm moving up.
I'm moving up.
Okay.
Chris, can you mark some of these guys?
Ryan's got trouble.
I can't move, I'm pinned.
Gotta hit him, Chris. It's all you, dude. Yeah, I'm on it. Light him up.
Oh god, look out.
Let's go. He's down. I'm pushing forward.
Bronson, wait.
I'm down.
Hold on.
Let's go, revive me. Let's go.
Oh, there's a guy right behind me. Alright, you're fine. Get up.
Okay, last two. Hit him.
Turret's down. Get this guy on the left. Good. Okay, go. We gotta move up forward.
Last one. Keep the pressure on. Whoa. Wait for him to reload.
This guy's nuts.
You better pay!
Somebody do something.
I'm gonna make you big! Yeah!
Good. Come on. Yes.
That is the last one. Good game, guys.
Okay, that was good. Welcome, guys. So this is the base of operations.
Sweet home, huh?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
This place is huge.
Let's try to get medical online first.
Thank you, guys. Okay, so now I'll talk a little bit about how ZBrush has fit into our pipeline for the division as far as the weapons go anyway. Like I mentioned earlier a little bit during some of the Future Soldier stuff, that once we started getting into a big list of weapons and assets, we needed a quicker, cleaner, better pipeline, and this is what I'm going to touch on a little bit. So previously, we've used 3ds Max for doing our high-res weapons. There's some issues with that sometimes, speed being the main thing right now. I thought this was a good image to show some of the complexity of the previous way we were doing weapons. We were trying to get every detail we could in because of how much we love the accuracy and the authenticity of this stuff. But it's a lot of work. All of that stuff is continuous meshes. There's no free-floating geometry over it to fake normals. That's all built the way it would be built. It's very, very time-consuming. There's a ton of geometry there. There's not a whole lot of flexibility for changing the asset once you're done with it, because, I mean, looking at the side of the receiver right here, I mean, if you need to change something, if something doesn't flow, there's a million edges you have to go back in and redo now. And when we get to do our normal map bakes, I'm sure a lot of people are aware, if you have something modeled perfectly and you project it down to normals, if the edges are too sharp, there's not really any point to it, it doesn't read well. So we have to smooth that stuff out. Doing that with something modeled like this is very difficult. So we can either have it very, very accurate and it bakes poorly, or it bakes really well and it's not accurate anymore. And having both of those assets, that's two completely different assets at this point. So, Dynamesh. This came out, I think 2 years ago, something like that, and completely blew our minds. The fact that we could go in and use ZBrush and actually get a lot more of the clipping options, a lot more polishing features. We could actually start building a ton of geometry, merging it together. It completely changed everything for us. Mr. Clymer's favorite phrase, game changer. Just wanted to tell you that. Yeah, so this was a huge thing for us. It let us do quick edits, so if we suddenly need to change something on the weapon, it takes no time. We have, it's very, very easy for us to take the completely accurate weapon, smooth it out a little bit, get the normal map version, retain the details that we know we need to retain, and then revert back to a completely accurate weapon later. This is great because this gives us a library of stuff that we can use across multiple projects now. So if we need a third-person shooter, a first-person shooter, a cinematic for another team, we have this ready to go, and we can change it very quickly and adapt it to whatever game we're putting it to, as opposed to just making it for this one game and then being completely done with it. So, that being said, we're going to start showing some stuff actually in ZBrush, and this is the first time any of these two weapons that we're talking about today have actually been shown, I think. So, it's kind of fun. Yeah, there we go. This is a weapon called an LVOA. It's based off of an M4. And it's actually really fun to point this out because the library system works really well for this. We have an M4 already made, and this is on the same platform. We can start modifying smaller pieces and smaller proportions to make this into the new asset because of Dynamesh, instead of starting over completely from scratch. So one of the things that we really enjoy doing, and that's been really helpful for us in the past, since Gunsmith on Future Soldier, when the weapons break apart, we need the inside of these things. We have to show different pieces, we have to show different, like the gas systems, the triggers. If the player needs to modify it, we need to be able to show it. So in order to future-proof our library as much as you can in the digital age anyway, we wanted to see if we could do that. So now can I do it? Is this? So, there's all of our broken stuff. In order to make sure that we could use this for whatever we needed to in the future, we went ahead and modeled everything we actually could. So you'll actually notice on the inside of the receiver, they're cut in the way they should be. There's actually threads where it meets up with the barrel nut in the barrel. The gas system hole is there. We have pins that actually exist. So anything internally that we can do, we go ahead and do it, including, wait, where's one of my favorite ones? Turn off perspective. Rifling on the inside of the barrel. We're very excited about that.
You can clap, it's okay.
Yeah, please go ahead. Makes us feel better. So one of the great things about Dynamesh, and I'll show this piece off in particular, is traditional box modeling on a piece like this is not fun. Looking at that should really scare some people because it scared me. But what's great about Dynamesh, and one of the things that Clymer will touch on a little bit later, is we've been so involved with a lot of these weapon systems for years, we started kind of looking at and approaching it kind of how people would actually machine this stuff. So in order to make this piece, we know it starts from, let's say, a big block of aluminum. We'll draw the block in, we'll make sure it's scaled correctly, and then we'll start actually cutting away at it the same way the machine would. After you stare at this stuff for years, you kind of start to figure out a little bit of, hey, this is probably the order of operations that this was made. So we'll actually go in and we'll carve the side pieces first, start adding in the holes on the top and the bottom for the heat to escape, and then start putting in shapes like this to make room for the gas system in the barrel. And this is the stuff that in the past, box modeling, this wouldn't taken a very, very long time, would have been very not fun, and would not have been able to be reused again. Now we can reuse all this stuff, and it just works. So I'll go ahead and do the unawesome button. Sorry. There we go. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Michael Galley right here to show how we do some of the hard surface operations inside of ZBrush for the weapon systems. So.
While you're doing the swap, we'll take a question from the floor. Here I come. Here we go.
Thank you. Very nice work. So is there a guy in your company that plays around with weapons to figure out how weapons work?
We have 3 of them. They're up here.
Oh, do you actually have like real weapons in your company and look at them, or how do you
not in the company. That doesn't seem very safe.
Yeah, exactly. But they look so real, you know?
Well, after we've been involved with this for so long that eventually it kind of became a hobby for a lot of us too. When I started, I was actually more into the vehicle side of things. I knew a little bit about firearms from when I grew up, and in the last 6 years, it grows on you, and you learn so much from needing to be so accurate that it kind of just becomes something you get involved with anyway. So the 3 of us, I think that's pretty much what happened.
Thanks, guys, for coming out. We really appreciate it, and we're very excited for the opportunity to show you guys some of this stuff. So this is a receiver off of an M14, and this is the final product, one part of a bunch of other parts that make up the M14. And I'm going to go through basically an abridged process of how I made this piece. So it's got, again, as JD mentioned, this Dynamesh. So it allows us to put a whole lot of polys into it and get the shapes that we want very easily, especially compared to older methods like 3ds Max modeling. Okay, so I will first off import my starting mesh. So this is what I made in 3ds Max. We all kind of have different methods as far as how much ZBrush we use, how much 3ds Max we use. I kind of hover somewhere around 50-50% in each program. So this part was made in 3ds Max. Basically all I did was I wanted to establish the main silhouette, the large details on the object. And then I will add all the holding edges and stuff. And the cool thing is that ZBrush plays really, really nice with Max in that way, so all I need to do is subdivide it and it acts the same as using a turbo smooth modifier inside of Max or a smooth preview in Maya. So after I get the object to about this point inside of Max, what I'll start doing is I will create the Dynamesh pieces that I use to kind of mill out the rest of the details as if are similar to how it's actually created. Which is actually, here we go. I'm gonna get rid of your gun. Okay, so these are all the parts that I whipped up really quick in Max, one at a time. So I mean, looking at it now, it kind of looks pretty complicated, but I mean, seeing them one at a time, they're all really simple shapes, which is one thing that I love about doing the hard surface stuff and using ZBrush is that I can very quickly just look at reference pictures and look and see all of the highlights and shadows, so then I can just establish where I need all these hard edges on the model and just take it step by step. So I'm going to append a couple of these parts into the starting piece and start subtracting some of these parts out. So let's see. We'll grab, actually, before I do that, I want to point out that since all these are different colors, they were all brought in as separate polygroups. And the only thing I did to do that was, these are all separate parts inside of Max, and then exporting them all in one OBJ. They're all separate polygroups already, which is really beneficial because all I have to do is come in here under the subtool palette, go to split, and then split to parts. And then what that'll do is that'll split all these out into their own separate subtools, which makes it very, very easy to go through all of these and pick out the ones that I need. And another thing worth mentioning, the arrow keys are your friend. So you don't always have to have the subtool palette open. You can use the arrow keys to move up and down in the list. And if you hold Control and up and down, you actually move the object in the list, which comes in handy all the time, especially when I have this many subtools. So I'm just going to have this subtool selected. So I will append that into this file. So actually, another thing, this needs to be Dynameshed. So we use a script called Dynamesh Master. There's a few main benefits that we have by doing it this way. So typically the regular Dynamesh, the way it works is you set your resolution and then you Dynamesh it and it puts those polys on it. But the only kind of downside to that for our use is that it's relative to other objects in the scene. So if I have this receiver and then I have another small little bolt, say I want to put a really high resolution on the receiver, but the bolt has a ton of detail too, so I would want to put all that a lot of polys on the bolt too. But sometimes with the limitations of the default Dynamesh, it'll not allow me to put as much polys as I may need. So I'm going to Dynamesh this at about 3 million, which is normally a pretty good number for us to be able to work with and subtract out parts and add our details when we need it. Okay, so that process is already done. And the first step, which is very simple, is turning this on as a subtractive tool and then hitting, I'll use the hotkey Control-E, which is just merge down, but you can also find it right down here. And then all that's going to do is that's going to merge in this subtool into the receiver. So then I'm just going to hit the Dynamesh button again, which is these parts up here are from the Dynamesh Master plugin that I mentioned, which I'm pretty sure you can download off of Pixelogic's website. And then all that's going to do is that's going to subtract that front part out of the receiver, which is just the starting process of kind of milling out the more complex shapes of the receiver. All right, so there we go. So it's, as you can see, it's really simple to make complex shapes, just taking it a step at a time, making these simple shapes in Max, or now with the 4R7 stuff with ZBrush now, which will be awesome. But sometimes when I will go through this step, I'll like to duplicate it, or duplicate my subtool. Actually, I subdivided. I forgot a key there. So Control-Shift-D, all I did is I just duplicated the subtool, and I will go over a little bit why I did that a little later. It's mainly for detail preservation. But I am now going to just bring in a couple more parts and just subtract a couple more so you can kind of see a little more of the process of slowly taking out all these details from the mesh. Grab that one, and this guy here. This one. And I'm also, as a note, I'm just alt-clicking on these objects just to switch in between the subtools quickly, which is really useful, so that way you don't have to search through a list of 50, 60 subtools just to find what you're looking for. Okay, so I'm gonna move this guy out of the way really quick. So this is my duplicate that I want to preserve. And another little trick with a little bit of organization is that if you actually use the Shift key, and then these arrows, what it'll do is that'll go to the extents of the list, so hitting it will go to the bottom, and then being at the top, I can shift and hit on the move one, and it'll move that subtool down to the bottom. So sometimes if you have something that you want to duplicate that you want to kind of just get out of the way, you can just duplicate it and then shift click on the arrow to just move it to the bottom so you don't accidentally touch it. Okay, so I will go ahead and subtract out a couple more of these parts. And again, it's just hitting Control-E to merge those in, subtracting them out, and just re-hitting the Dynamesh button. It's tons easier than the way that we used to do it. I mean, it's being able to not worry about topology as you just focus on small little, like just this one corner of the object. It's very, very, very beneficial for us.
I got a question from the Twitter feed while we're waiting for that.
Okay.
Mako wants to know, how do you keep the edges and the good hard surface details when you make new retopology?
That's a really good question, and that's actually pretty much the main reason why I duplicated it after I did that first subtraction, because what it's going to allow me to do is I will be able to reproject those details from some of the older versions back onto the current one. So say I re-Dynamesh something 30 times, 40 times, sometimes you kind of get a little bit of a sometimes you get a little bit of deterioration on some of the original edges. And what I'll do is, after having that first piece when it's just freshly subdivided and it's got the crisp edges, it really allows me quickly to just polish in, or project back in the details where I need them. So if there's any kind of issues on any of the edges, I can bring them back in and keep those details from the original version. So these are just after a couple more subtractions, and that's also taking out this piece, which is where the iron sight sits. So not everything has to be made in Max to do all this Dynamesh stuff. There's a lot of stuff inside of ZBrush that makes it really simple to just insert cylinders, insert cubes, stretch them out to the shape you need them, and then use those as the Dynamesh shapes. So this part is actually cut inside because there is that's the wrong one. Let's see. There is a hole that's cut all the way through to where the iron sights rotate on. I'll just do it this way because I don't see my brush. So I will append this regular cylinder in, but normally when you have insert multi-mesh tools, it's it's very simple. You just drag it in, draws it right on the object, and you can place it right where you need it, and then just shrink it down, get it into place, and then subtract it out pretty much. So I'm just going to position this quickly, semi-quickly, as quickly as my mouse allows. So I'm just going to stretch this out and then go to the side, make sure that and again, this would be another situation where for R7, snapping the pivot will be awesome. So scale this down to the approximate size, about where I want it. And maybe a little smaller. Okay, and then put that back through here. There we go. Okay, so obviously this is faceted, so I'm going to want to smooth it out a little bit, and I'm not really worried about the smoothness over here because it doesn't affect the Dynamesh operation since it's just going to be subtracting out of the receiver. So I'm going to just subtract that piece out really quick. Change my Dynamesh resolution again. And I don't know if I mentioned it before, but another benefit of using the Dynamesh master script is that you can actually set an actual number. So say you need something that sit exactly at 6 million polys or something like that. It's super easy to put 5 million on the receiver and then put another 4 million on a little bolt that you need to add all these little details to. So it's very, very helpful for us, and we'd be a little lost without it. Okay, so while this is going, the next thing that I'm going to kind of do is additive stuff, which is even simpler than the subtractive operations. I mean, it's literally just merging it in and then Dynameshing it, and it's very, very simple to, I mean, that's literally the steps. Merge it and Dynamesh it.
You got a question here from the floor.
Okay.
Hey, this is really, really awesome. I just wanted to ask, when you're bringing stuff in from Max into ZBrush, and you have all of these different Boolean objects that you're going to be using in order to create those, how do you keep organized?
How do I keep them organized?
Yeah, keep them organized. You just bring them in as one OBJ and then split, and then, or do you are you constantly bringing in pieces or recreating pieces? Do you save the scraps? Do you make it one off every time?
Sure. It's kind of dependent on the part that I'm working on, but for this one specifically, I just kind of it was about as messy as it looked in here. It's kind of clustered inside of Max, but I would just hide it while I'm working on a different piece, come back to it, and I'll either export it all as one OBJ, which is, as I mentioned before, having all the different polygroups makes it super easy to separate it all out. Or I'll sometimes, if it's either fewer parts or something, I'll just use GoZ, send it straight over to ZBrush, and then append it back into the subtool that I'm working on. Does that answer your question? Okay. So another benefit of using Dynamesh and the subtractive pieces and everything is that it actually it creates polygroups based off of each operation, which can really come in handy sometimes, like this right here, just this little inside ring part. I can control-click on that, and it's going to select that polygroup and hide the rest of the polygroups. This can be really beneficial because what it will allow me to do is I can hit, not that one, I can hit S-pivot, which will set the pivot to the visible polygons. And then now that I can do that, I can turn on radial symmetry, and that's focused right around that part. And even if I unhide the polygroup, it's still right here, which is perfect when I want to do things like put a bevel around this edge or any kind of radial details, really. And another thing to note is that, as you can see, this capped out at 40 for the radial symmetry, but it's kind of a weird fix. But if you turn on another axis and then turn it off, you can switch it back up to 100, which sometimes you need to get that extra little bit of fidelity. So one brush that I will use a lot while working on this stuff is hard polish. because what it allows me to do is that it's really awesome for creating bevels and getting a nice little sharp edge on things. But one thing to look out for when you're working on it is that you want to kind of smooth your edges sometimes, because if it's too hard, it'll try to pick the normal of the edge, so you'll either end up getting this side or this side, which you don't really want. So I'm just going to smooth this out a little bit, and let's say I want to put a chamfer on this. I'm just going to go through with H-polish and just, let me smooth that a little bit more, and then go in here like that, and then, I mean, it's very, very, very simple to get these kinds of details on things. But on the real M14, it doesn't have that, so I'm going to leave it off. But one thing it does have is a kind of little ridged star pattern on the side right here. So, which you'll see in some of the later versions of how I did that. So I'm just going to go with pretty small brush size, but all I want to do is just, I'll start about here. And I'm just using the standard brush. I'm just going to draw that in right here. And so it's really useful to get all these kinds of quick, what would be very complex details to do in the actual model, which, going back to what JD mentioned, it's awesome being able to put all this stuff in the high res rather than leaving it to the texture, because down the road when we're doing a first person gun that needs all this kind of high res detail, we have it available to us. So we definitely try to put as much detail in this stuff as we can to future proof it.
Hi. I was wondering how it is that you go about checking your references. You said you don't get the guns for real, which makes sense. But so how do you go about making sure that everything's correct and measuring it up and making sure everything fits so you don't get yelled at on the internet?
It's kind of hard to say sometimes, because there's a lot of different kinds of reference online. Sometimes there's tons of reference and we can find exact specifications for tons of guns, but sometimes when you're working with ones that aren't so common, you have to not necessarily do guesswork, but kind of compare it. For example, there was a different gun that I worked on that was somewhat uncommon, but I know the caliber of it. So what I'll do is I'll start with the actual diameter of the inside of the barrel, and then I'll have a reference image in. So I know that the diameter of the barrel is absolutely perfect because it's measured. And I'll start from there and just like work my way back, so that way I have a starting point from a measurement. But sometimes you don't always have those resources, but we'll just have to do our best with it and try to get the best results that we can.
Yeah, that was perfect, because I think you might have just answered the next question from Jason on Twitter. He was asked, but maybe there's more here, so I'm going to ask it anyways. When working with real-world assets like weapons, how do you guys manage keeping all the gun parts to scale? So that's pretty much what you're doing to try and keep the weapons to scale? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we definitely pride ourselves in making these things as authentic.
Jason, Michael's that good. He knew what your question was in advance.
It's completely intentional. Oh, actually, this is a good segue as to why you need to clear the pivot before you bring something back in, because it will mess up your world space if you don't reset that. So that's where it's supposed to be. So I need to hit C pivot to set it back. So now that that's back, all I'm going to do is I'm going to merge this piece in real quick, just Dynamesh. And you don't have to worry about Dynameshing the parts that you're adding or subtracting usually. So these are all just subdivided. And just because they're smooth, Dynamesh is going to take care of cleaning up all those polys and merging it all with the rest of the receiver. So once this is done, I'm going to show a little bit of the process of cleaning up some of the edges, as someone asked earlier. So the main brushes I'll use for cleanup are the planar flatten brush and the smooth brush, really. I mean, after getting all of these hard edges in here, sometimes it can be a little difficult to keep them from getting distorted. As you can actually see up here, this is the kind of stuff that sometimes happens if you keep Dynameshing something over and over and over. And what I mentioned before about duplicating that original piece. So this one has a couple of the original cuts, but sometimes what you, like say you Dynamesh something 40 steps in, or after 40 subtractions, what you can do is you can go back to your original piece subtract out that one piece that you need, and then just to get that edge, and then you can go back in and project it on. So all you need to do to project is, let me see if actually this edge, how this one's done up here. I think it needs to be a little distorted. Oh, not that much. So you need to be wary of these being a little too much distorted, because they can get to a point because it's using the same geometry, and it's going to try to morph your geometry to the projected piece, so you do need to be wary of that. So as you can see, this stuff's softened out here a little bit and a little distorted. But the cool thing is I'm just going to go in and mask that part out, Control-click, invert it. And then all I have to do is go down to the Project tab under Subtools. Thank you. They both need to be visible. You can use solo mode, which is good. Solo mode doesn't respect projecting, so you don't have to work with both the meshes on top of each other. But you just hit Project All, and what that's going to do is it's going to revert this edge here and the unmasked part to the source mesh. So you just need to make sure that the one that you are trying to edit is the one that you have visible, or excuse me, selected. And as you can see, if you get these messed up edges after dynameshing, it's super easy to go back in and get that back to its original state. And I actually forgot to mask some of that stuff, so I'll do that too. But that's like the main process I go through of dynameshing all this stuff out, and it's awesome being able to just go through and add all this detail that I want and not worry about topology in the least bit. So just skipping through some of these steps, there's a couple, not screenshots, but like variations that I saved during the process of making it. So this was the whole thing with basically other exterior pieces subtracted out, and just went a little further. And this is the radial detail that I was mentioning earlier, which was with the set pivot and just a standard brush. And then I'll load up the next one. So I'll just continue along this whole process, just looking at reference, figuring out where these shapes need to be, adding the detail where they need to be added. Sometimes the hardest part is just getting the process down of what needs to be subtracted and what kind of shape it needs to be. But once you have that down, Dynamesh just does all the work. You just need to make the original parts, which is, really simple, because basically I'll just make in Max, and again, which will be awesome to do in ZBrush, hopefully soon. I made this out as a plane, and then just extruded it out, and then basically turn it into a box, and then that is all I need to subtract out and get all of these edges along here, and that's literally what the rest of this is. It's just taking it step by step, and it's not that difficult. So again, that will eventually lead me to the final receiver, which is this part here. And I'll go in and add all these in with the layer brush or with masks. There's tons of ways that you can do it. And another thing that JD mentioned, obviously, since we are making all these in the long run for games, we need to make sure that these bake down well. So sometimes when you have all these crisp edges, it's too sharp, and those are only represented by maybe a pixel in the texture map, so it's not going to come through, and it's going to look blocky, and the normal map's not going to do any work for you. So one thing that's really useful for us inside of ZBrush is to use the polish feature. But the first thing I want to do before I do that is I want to set a morph target. So just go down to the morph target subpalette and then hit store empty. So now that that's stored, it's going to have kind of a save state of this current version of the receiver. And then all I have to do is go up here to the polish tab, which is under deformation. It's under the deformation subpalette right here. And I'll crank that up to maybe 35 or so. and then let that run. So while that's doing that, I wanted to mention really quick the open circle and the closed circle. The closed circle is more of like a uniform Gaussian blur kind of effect, and the open circle will kind of try to retain the shape of the object a little better sometimes. So depending on what you're working on, one may work better than the other. So it's kind of worth just playing with them, figuring out which one works better for your situation. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the morph brush, and as you can see, a lot of these details got kind of muddy, which is good for the edges. I mean, these will bake down really well. They're very soft. They're going to look good in the game, which is exactly what I want. But at the same time, I'm losing all the small details that I had, like the text, the threads, some of that kind of stuff. So with the morph brush, all I can do is I can go in, and it will allow me to just paint back in the detail that I want. So I can have this all ready to bake without sacrificing any of the details and worrying about doing this stuff in the texture, which again goes back to future-proofing these and making sure that they're going to be useful for all of our applications down the road. So you basically just go back in and paint all the sharp detail back in that you want, and then after you have that done, you can send this thing off to bake it. We'll make the low res, obviously. But after all that's completed, then you just bake this thing down, and it's super easy to do. I mean, it's compared to doing this the old-fashioned way, you'd have to have all these holding edges, and you can either get it authentic with very, very tight holding edges so you get all these crisp edges, or all the loose holding edges so it's perfect for baking. But before Dynamesh and the polish, it was pretty difficult to do both without making two separate pieces. So this receiver is all just one piece of one giant gun. So I absolutely love putting as much detail into this stuff as I can. And each piece is made this same method for the most part. I use Dynamesh very heavily. That's probably my main use of ZBrush. It allows me to get all these very complex shapes and booleans, and it just works phenomenally for us. And we just strive to make as much detail as we can and just go crazy on these things because it's fun for us. And one thing I need to show, because it keeps coming up from my colleagues, so I'm going to just go ahead and hit the expose button. And they kind of make fun of me for it, but I enjoy it. So I like to go into kind of, I won't say unnecessary because it sounds bad, but I'll add as much detail as I can. So for example, this is the operating rod spring guide. And I like to do small little details like making sure it has that little bit of wobble in it, and very small stuff like that. Keep in mind that this will never be seen by anybody, probably not even myself anymore. But,
well, a couple thousand people just saw it, so you're good right there.
Yeah,
there you go.
Thank you. But that about wraps up what I was going to cover, so I'll go ahead and release the wheel to Mike Clymer.
Great.
So hello, my name's Mike Clymer. I've been working at Redstorm for about 8 years now. I'm one of the obsessive detail guys as well. I held the flag as most obsessive until Gally joined the team, and then he took my crown. So very, very occasionally, we find CAD data for guns. Sometimes they're on websites. Oh, well, there you go. Hey, hello. So anyway, occasionally we do find CAD data for guns. You can find them on websites. They're all over the place. Stumble across them, which is really nice because CAD data is quite literally the most accurate data you can come across for a gun. I mean, if you're going to take one of these things and machine it into the real thing, the CAD data is where you're going to want to start. So if you're lucky enough to find something like that, and you're lucky enough to have it in a format that you can either get into 3D Studio Max or Maya or another software package to convert it into something that ZBrush can read, like an OBJ, when it finally comes in, it looks okay, but it doesn't look great. There's a lot of faceting in the edges. The corners are very sharp and clean, which is nice, but the round surfaces are generally kind of chunky, and it's always triangulated, so there's no quads when CAD data gets converted, which is not good for smoothing operations. So if you were to subdivide this right now, that does not look good. So there's a little bit of a cleanup process that we sort of developed that will let us use these CAD files when we find them. So if I look at polyframe mode here, it's all one poly group right now, which is fine, but we're going to fix that. Where am I here? So I have a custom toolbar loaded up here with a button called Group by Normals, which is also available, damn it, go away, under polygroups here. Down here, there's Group by Normal, and it's got a threshold, so it's a lot like 3D Studio Max with smoothing groups. You can adjust that up or down, and what it's going to do is it's going to actually evaluate the angle between the faces, and if it meets that angle criteria, it's going to split it out into its own polygroup, which is going to help me later clean this up. So if I hit that Group by right now, you can see what it's done is it's gone through, and it's very quickly evaluated the mesh and broken it up into separate polygroups. And this is really close to what I need for the final cleanup step. But you can see that there's a single polygroup right here for this front face, but this 45-degree bevel, the flat edge in here, and this next 45 degree, all maintained, one polygroup, because they didn't meet that 45-degree threshold. Now, I could very simply go in there, undo that, change the threshold to, say, 33, 30, and then run it again, and it will fix a lot of that stuff. But there's also the risk that it'll start to separate individual faces on the round parts into their own polygroups, which is what I don't want. So real easy way to fix that, if you hold down Control-Shift and bring up your masking options, you can switch between lasso, mask rectangle, things like that. So I'm going to start by isolating faces and hiding faces in order to start polygrouping them. When an entire mesh is visible and unmasked, if you hit Control-W, it'll default polygroup that into a single polygroup. When things are masked, it'll do the same thing. It'll convert the mask section of the mesh into its own polygroup, which is something that I'll cover here in a minute. And it also does it with visibility. So if I were to start coming in here and hitting Control-W, it'll re-polygroup it. I'll hide it, Control-W, hide it, Control-W, hide it, Control-W, hide, Control-W, and bring everything back. So now you see that every one of those faceted angles right there is its own polygroup. So this will go through the entire process. I'll go through every one of these angles that I want to be broken out into its own polygroup, hide it, re-polygroup it, bring it back, move on to the next section. Now occasionally you'll come across areas like this that have a fairly complicated compound curves in them. I will not show you how to do that right now because it's a nightmare and I will probably break it. So we're going to bypass that. We're going to skip ahead a step to a model that I already have polygrouped. And you can see here that it went from initially 1 to dozens. And each one is broken up along hard edges around the model. Nothing else on the model has changed, just the polygroups. So now what I'm going to do is there's another button up I have up here because I use it a lot called Crease Polygroups, which you can get to under the Tools palette, the Geometry subpalette, and then the Crease option. And then you can crease what's visible, crease all, which will hit every edge, crease by polygroups, and uncrease. So if you hit that Crease Polygroups, and I'll zoom in real close here so you can see what it's doing, but it gives it this double dotted line going through here. So I'll undo that and then redo that. And you can see what that does is it just puts that dotted line or the doubled line between every single one of those polygroup faces. So now that everything, come back, now that everything is creased and polygrouped, I can start to divide that, and it doesn't destroy the mesh. So I'll go back to the beginning. It starts out at 5,799 points. I start to divide it, and I'm up to 2.2 million already. And all it's done is soften out some of these edges, which is going to give me a really good place to start with the Boolean or the Dynamesh operations. I also use the Dynamesh master script, primarily because I can set exactly how many polygon points that I want. I can have 1.5 million on a receiver, or I can have 1.5 million on a bolt that's attached to the receiver. So I can have basically as many poly points as I want in order to get the detail that I need. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll run the Dynamesh script on it. We'll let it do its processing. And then after the Dynamesh is done, we will have a evenly topologized mesh that can be gone through and cleaned up with clip curve, clip circles, hard polish. Hard polish is one of the buttons or the brushes that I use absolutely on every mesh that I've ever worked on. It makes softening edges and rounding corners incredibly easy.
So Avi's asking, where do you get references for the weapons that you guys are doing?
Google. Simple. Google image search.
What, no Bing?
What? Who's that? No, we just use image searching on the web. We do use programs to sort of organize and consolidate everything. So we can search through things with image tagging. So every time we come across an image that's going to be useful for reference, we'll save it, we'll put it on our servers, we'll go through and tag that image with keyword descriptors, if it's an M14 or if it's a sniper rifle or if it's a scope, whatever it is. We'll tag it, we'll describe it, we'll organize it in folders, and then the next time somebody's working on something that they need reference of, let's say how the way paint gets damaged on a gun after it's been used for years, all they have to do is go into the program, type in paint, and it'll bring up every image that's been tagged with paint, and they can use that as reference to help. So we're kind of, it's not special the way we get the references, but what's important for us is how we organize the references. The more organized you can be, the easier it is to find. The easier it is to find, the easier life is in the long run.
We got another question here from the floor. Do you guys go to conferences, though, too, don't you? Military conferences? And
yeah, we're actually really lucky because Fort Bragg is just south of us. They're like an hour south of us, which is one of the big Army bases in the area. And every now and again, they have shows down there that you can go and see things that are on display and actually look at them up close and things like that. So, yeah.
Let's take a quick question from the floor.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions about just the amount of massive data. Like, first, do you convert IGES files, and is there a process for that? And the second thing is, these are massive amounts of millions of polygons, and do you guys have a limit in the game for your polygons?
Oh, absolutely. The ZBrush stuff that we do is only ever used to bake normal maps off of, and to reference as we're building the low polys around them. So I look forward to the day when I can just dump a ZBrush model into a game and be done with it, because that's less work for me. But yeah, right now we have to retopologize, rebuild it. We'll bake it down into a normal map, and then that'll go in the game. And as far as the amount of data that you can put into the game, that all depends on the game and the platform that it's running on and the engine that it's running on and things like that. But generally speaking, our guns for shooter-type games can range between, say, 2,500 polygons, triangles, not quads, 2,500 triangles on the low side of things, all the way up to 10,000, 15,000 on the high side of things once you start putting scopes and bipods and grenade launchers and things like that on there. So there's a pretty wide range, but it just depends on what the platform is and what it's going to run on. Does that answer the question? Oh, yeah, there's, occasionally you'll come across those IGES files. It's been a while since I converted one, but I think the last time I did it was in 3D Studio Max. There was an IGES importer that I was able to bring it in there. If I remember right, it was kind of slow to do it, but you were able to get it and sort of set a little bit of resolution as far as how things were rounded out and softened, but you'll still end up going through this whole same process of converting it into something that's usable. So now that everything's Dynameshed, you can sort of see that there's still some faceting and stuff going on in here. But Dynamesh has also maintained all of my polygroups, and because it's at such a high resolution, the edge delineation between the polygroups is incredibly clean because there's so many edges and points there. So under the same deformation tab that Mike Galley showed, so under the deformations tab, there's a polish by features, polish by groups, and polish crisp edges. The polish by features is sort of the parent of these other two. It does both groups and crisp edges. If you want to ignore crisp edges and just do groups, you do groups, obviously, and if you want to do the opposite, you do just crisp edges. But I also have that up here as well. And you can see what happens is as you slide that up and down, well, actually, here, let me do this. Let me change that back to the open circle. And this is what Mike was talking about earlier, other Mike, that one. The open circle, closed circle will give you different results. So if I go back 2 or 3 steps, right in here you can see some faceting, and as I polish it, it starts to go away a little bit, but it's not going away very fast. If you change that to an open circle, and I'll go back to the beginning again, if you change that to an open circle and slide that up, and it polishes now, and it's almost completely gone. So what you've done is you've now kept your polygroups, you've kept your sharp edges, and you've rounded out the things that were horribly triangulated in the first place. And you can go in there and, nope, wrong polish, undo. You can polish by features again, and it'll continue to go in there and clean that up. So now you've actually got something that's CAD data accurate, that's clean, dense geometry that you can start stamping in letters. You can put manufacturer information in their serial numbers, things like that. Or you can do the same thing that Mike did and use the polish features and start to soften up those edges in order to make it something that's bakeable. And fairly quickly, you've got something that is usable in a high poly model, and you can work with it. Okay? So the next thing I'm going to cover is a bolt. It's not really glamorous, but everything that's hard surface has bolts. Something has to hold it together, right? So you're always going to be making bolts. So I'm just going to go through some of the smaller steps that I use in order to make these bolts. And unfortunately, anytime you look at a gun, a vehicle, a suit of armor, whatever it is, it seems like you never come across the same bolt twice. They're always different. So you'll end up making a lot of them, but I don't want to make them over and over again. So what I'll do is I'll make them and I'll store them as a insert multi-mesh brush. And next time you happen to come across a rivet that's been hammered down as opposed to machine pressed, you can just load that up, go to that rivet, draw it in, and be done with it. And in some cases you'll have close enough. Sometimes you'll have to go back through and make them by hand, which is kind of where you start. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with the cylinder here, real simple, and I'm going to start with the head of a hex bolt. So nothing special about the geometry. I'm going to use that same crease by normals or polygroup by normal, which is going to polygroup it for me, crease it, and divide it, and start building out the basic shape. I also use radial symmetry a lot for this sort of stuff. Make sure to turn on local symmetry so it's working around the center of the object. Nope, not that one, that one. And we're going to go ahead and start to extrude some faces. You can extrude faces by holding down the control button with the transpose line and then dragging out on this middle white circle here. And then shift will constrain it to the axis that the transpose line is drawn on. But you can't do that with subdivisions, so I'm going to delete lower. I'm going to have just that one face. Let me turn that off so I can work. And then just control, shift, and drag, and it's going to extrude that face out all the way down the line. But you can see what happened is it's just a single extrusion. So if I undo that and Control-Shift drag out a little bit, I'm not going to move the mouse, the keys, the camera. I'm not going to touch anything. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the number 1 key, which is going to repeat the last action. So you can just keep shooting those down, and now you've got evenly spaced topology all the way down. Now I'm going to Dynamesh this anyway, so that really doesn't make a whole lot of difference to me, but it's a handy thing to have for the handguard that JD showed earlier. It had, I don't know, like 60 holes cut into it, and they were all spaced evenly. You can either try to eyeball that, you can do some sorcery to duplicate 2 and line one up on top of the other and then delete the other one, or you can just duplicate one, hit the 1 key, and then it'll duplicate down the line in the same spacing, which makes it real nice and easy. So now I have a bolt-y kind of shape. And I'm going to go ahead and divide that one more time. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do group by normals, crease, and then divide that a couple more times just so it's nice and sharp in here. I'm going to use the Dynamesh master to convert that into a Dynamesh. So I'm going to start with 1,000,000 polygons, and that sounds excessive, and it is. So. But it makes sure that I have all the detail that I need and that I'm not going to need any more later and sort of get worked into a whole. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add some threads along here. And you can do it with radial symmetry and then just draw each thread out, but you're going to want to keep them spaced out evenly because they're machined parts. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to load up a flat plane and I'm going to make an alpha. Come here. Where'd you go? We're going to go ahead and do new document. No. There it is. OK. OK, so I'm going to go into polyframe mode. I'm going to go down here to, where is it, initialize. And I'm going to go ahead and set the H divide and the subdivide down. And I'm just going to go ahead and crank one of those up to 3. And it doesn't really matter which one. All you want is a single vert or a single edge in the middle there. Go on up here to make Polymesh 3D, mask that out, invert it, and then we're just going to pull that up so you have sort of a domed peak shape in the middle. And then normally I would go ahead and just resize my document so it's square, but this will get the job done just the same. Go over here under the Alphas tab. Oops. Alpha tab. Come on. And do grab doc. And what it's going to do is it's going to generate an alpha based on that piece of geometry, so you can use that for doing your threads. So we're going to go back here. We're going to open this up. And then I'm going to do it with a mask. And you can just leave the mask pen on, and it'll get the job done, because if you drag off the circle here, or off the edge, it'll do your mask. I have an extra tab off to the side that has this alphas menu up here, down here. So if you go to modify, and then H tile, and we're going to go ahead and just put that up to, I don't know, 14. Sounds like a good number. And when you drag that out now you've got 14 evenly spaced threads all the way throughout that piece of the bolt. I'm going to turn off polyframe so it doesn't lag on me there. I'm going to invert that, so I've just got the threads. And then under the deformations tab, I'm going to use inflate. Guess here and go with 20. Nope, not enough. 50? Yeah, that's good enough. OK. So what I've done is I've just inflated that geometry using the mask as a base, and it's giving me something that look like threads. I could go through the process of using one of the coil primitives. Not Ring 3D. Where are you? Yeah, he's up there somewhere. Oh, there it is. Right there, Spiral 3D. And you can, or Helix 3D. And you can adjust those in order to actually make a continuous spiral all the way down. And then you can draw it out and center it and actually make proper threads. That's even a little bit too extreme a detail for me. That one does it, but I don't. This one, with the threads just faked like that, it looks like threads from almost any angle except square on the side. And since these things get bolted into other gun parts, you never see the threads. So I could just stave all the time and not do this, but I do it anyway. So now you've got those threads in there, and we're going to want to make the actual hex head itself. So this is where I'm going to use radial symmetry again. I want to set that to 6, because it's a hex head. And then I'm gonna just, nope, not that one. Gonna drag out a mask, and it's gonna give me that hex shape. I'm gonna mask the rest of that stuff off, invert it so just that hex is masked, and I'm gonna hit Control W, which is gonna give me a new poly group right there for that hex shape. Now, I'll turn off symmetry because I don't need that anymore. Control-Shift-Click will isolate just that hex, and then I'm gonna use, go away. I'm gonna use edge loops down here and then panel loops, which is gonna help me extrude that shape in, but also clean up a bunch of these jagged edges around here. So I'm gonna go down to panel loops, set that to 1, turn off double, turn on inner. I'm gonna set the polish kinda high just so it softens things out a little bit. And I'm gonna go ahead and modify this bevel curve here in order to give just a 45-degree angle. And then if I hit panel loops, you can see what it does is it puts a nice clean 45-degree edge shooting straight back into the hole. So it's a little bit too shallow for me, so I'm gonna change that to 0.0, let's say 2.5. And I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna hit panel loops. You'll start to get a little bit of warbles. It's just like any edge extrusion or bevel in any other modeling package. If you push it too much, it'll start to wobble and distort on you. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put that back to 0.02 and then do that. And I can clean up some of that stuff later. But again, what it does, it gives me a new poly group right along that inside edge, which is gonna help me later on. Control-Shift-Click on it again. I'm gonna mask it and then bring everything back and then invert that mask. And this one's handy. Under the display not over there, over here. Under the display properties down here, there's an option for flip and double. Double is just gonna make it two-sided geometry. Flip is gonna flip the faces, so outside is inside, inside is outside. And if I hit that, I can actually see the hex head where I'm inserting it, so I know how deep I'm actually going and that I'm not gonna go through any extra geometry or anything like that. And then I can unmask and then hit flip again, and it comes back. So I'm gonna go ahead and Dynamesh that again just to clean up the geometry a little bit. And then because I have poly groups on everything, I can use this polish by features again, slide that up. Oh, actually, I'll show you another step. Go back a couple here. So because I did the edge extrusion from this guy here, this is all the same poly group. So if I do an isolate there, and then Control-Shift-X is gonna grow your visible selection, hide that inside face, and then polygroup it again, and now you've got a whole new set of polygroups in there that you can work with. Turn that polyframe off, Dynamesh it again, and then I'll use this polish by features in order to clean up some of the warbles that you see going on in here, and then polish that out as well just to soften things up just a touch. Okay, and then you can go through and add as much detail to things as you want. So go ahead and undo that again. Let's say you wanted to put a 45-degree bevels on the edges. It's a machined part. No machined part ever has a perfectly 90-degree sharp corner on it. They're always broken. So if I go to the clip brush, I can do radial symmetry again, turn that on, turn that up, and then do a 45-degree clip on this inside edge, and then I can do another 45-degree clip on the outside edge. And it'll give me a little bit of faceting because it's only clipping it 60 times, but you can take that, oh, there you go. You can do hard polish and then crank that up and then lower the intensity just a little bit, and you can go in there and break that. And now it's a 45-degree edge that's just been softened and rounded up. You can also do the way Gally showed and soften the edge with the smooth brush and then try to find that 45-degree right in there and bevel it that way. And then you can add ridges around the outside of it in order to have it bite into the machinery or anything that you wanted to do with it. So it's a fairly quick process to do it. There's only a handful of tools that you use, but all the tools that you use in this are actually the same tools that we use for everything else. It's hard polish, it's the panel loops, it's the alpha making, things like that. The other thing, though, one last tool that I want to show you too is planar flatten and planar deep. Those are, I don't believe they're loaded by default. I think you have to go to Lightbox and dig through to get to those. But JD mentioned earlier that we like to look at these things as actual machined parts. All machining is a subtractive process. So if you wanted to machine that down, you could do that and start to cut into the surfaces. You can also use it for things like flattening off a side. It's going to sort of just cut into whatever the depth of the brush depth mask is set to, and the size of the brush. So if I were to go even deeper than this, go all the way down here, you can see that it cuts even deeper. And then if I make the brush bigger, it cuts even deeper still. So it's a real good way to flatten off surfaces and machine out parts just using a couple of simple brushes and go from there. So before we get completely out of time here, Mike 1, didn't have a chance to show you this, but it's a really handy one as well. It's a non-default brush. It's under the Lightbox and the Smooth palette, but it's called Smooth Groups, and it's quite possibly one of the best brushes that I've ever found. It'll give you a little warning, and if you hold down Shift, it'll bring that up there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make my brush size smaller, and I'm going to go ahead and just mask a thing out here. Control-Alt-Click to sharpen it up, polygroup it, and you can see that what it does is it polygroups, oh, not that one, actually. Zoom out, too far. So it'll actually polygroup along those jagged edges with smooth groups on. Turn that down. Yeah, that's what I like to hear.
Yeah, it's been there for like 5 years.
Yeah. Bad documentation.
Whoa. Whoa, Tama, you hear? Oh, that's a dagger in our hearts. You know how long it takes us to make documentation? It's not the fun stuff, okay? It's like topology. You don't want to do it. So there's actually 11 smoothing brushes in ZBrush, by the way.
And a lot of them are fantastic. Smooth groups, smooth creases, and smooth valleys are awesome, awesome smoothing brushes. But the smooth groups, it'll go through and it'll just soften out those edges there. I can isolate that again, and now you see that there's this really nice, clean, high-resolution edge. I can isolate it, mask it, invert that, and if I wanted to do an extrusion off of there, now it's soft, clean geometry, it's polygrouped, and it's already got a nice, clean edge to it. So that's a really helpful one for adding surface detail and carving things in and out and things like that. Smooth groups will save your life. It's very handy to have.
Actually, Mike, show them, go to brush so they can see it, everyone. No, up at the top, all the way top menu, the brush menu, so they can see where you're getting this from. I'm going to show everyone where this is. Okay, so you see smooth brush modifiers, open that up.
That one there.
Okay, and then see there's a slider set you have right there, your brush. There you go. You were just on it, I believe. Hold on, it's blurry for me. Just go down a little bit. That one. One up. There you go. So you see right there?
Yep.
There's all your smoothing options for even the smoothing brushes, even a smooth stronger. Okay, subdiv. So it actually uses the subdivision algorithm when it's smoothing instead of the normal smoothing. Does anyone know about the alternate smooth? Do you guys know the alternate smooth? That's my favorite.
Yep.
That one's my favorite. So that's just so you guys know where it is. You don't actually have to grab the brushes individually. You guys can actually just change the slider to the regular smooth brush.
There you go. I learned something. All right, so that's pretty much it. It's a lot of simple brushes. There's only a handful of them. There's probably no more than 10 brushes that we use between the three of us, or the four of us, rather. but they're pretty powerful, right? You can smooth things, you can extrude things, you can add panel loops, you can carve into surfaces. It's pretty straightforward, but it's just time consuming. It's meticulous. So.
That's it.